Hi everyone. Okay, you should be able to see everything now. So we are in the very heart of St. Petersburg. This is the square, so which all of my not senior, what am I saying, seasoned viewers know very well. Senior too, but not only that. You may have seen it on my tours of the downtown of St. Petersburg in connection with multiple tours from the beginning of St. Petersburg, almost 400 years ago, up until the revolution and the Soviet theme tour. So this is the area that has seen it all. And the highlight is clearly the monument to Peter the Great. It was the first monument in St. Petersburg. And it's been here ever since times of Catherine the Great, which is the second half of the 18th century. Behind Peter the Great on a horseback is the golden dome of St. Isaac's Cathedral, and to the on the other side of the Neva River is the Vasilievsky Island or Basil Island, one of the first ones to be developed. And so the videos for this tour, and I'm always so sorry for that guy whose car is being towed away. The video was a combination of videos that my husband filmed earlier this year, and also my videographer, and I also include some photos from my camera roll and also other open sources. The English Embankment uh, has been here since the beginning of St. Petersburg, which was established in 1703, as you may remember. And English Embankment over the course of these centuries have changed its name multiple times. Uh, but it has always been a very important site due to its location and proximity to the downtown, and also uh, to that side behind the trees. You can't see much, but you can see a yellow building. This is the Admiralty building, the former shipbuilding yard, and right after the shipbuilding yard is already the Winter Palace. So you can see this is very close and an important site. So English Embankment has always been the area with a lot of affluent buildings and a lot of important people living there. As you know, I like to show you old photos, and the amazing thing is that, well, now I'm showing you a photo taken somewhat the beginning of 1890s, and not much really has changed since then, as you can see, right? Amazing. Same church, same monument, same trees. They're a little lower than they are now, but even the same lampposts. You see, this is the St. Isaac's. I did a tour about this church several months ago. We walked inside. We walked also on top of the church, and from there you can enjoy the fantastic views from the bird's eye. Well, the views of the city. And I highly recommend when everything is over and it's safe again to go to Russia, which I don't know when it's going to happen. Well, definitely seeing the city from the water and also from the top of from the dome of St. Isaac's Cathedral, both are absolute must. This is the view from the other side of the river Neva, overlooking the square, the cathedral, and to the right-hand side, this is the beginning of the English Embankment, exactly over there. But it makes sense to start from here because this is the square, because this square is related to many things we're going to talk about, many events we're going to talk about throughout this series of tours. The next episode is already scheduled for the upcoming weekend. It's going to be on Saturday. As you know, this next week, my schedule is going to look a bit different because of the very special live stream with a surprise visitor next Sunday. This tour will be scheduled shortly. Yes, this is what this embankment looked uh, approximately a century, well, 120 years ago or so. This was clearly taken before the revolution. You can see that just Well, I think you can just see the vibe. That's clearly an imperial times we're talking here. And well, you may see the beautiful houses on this embankment. So yeah, this is not just a sleepy neighborhood somewhere, no, it's the very, very central place. To this side, this long yellow building, it's actually two buildings in one. They are united with this archway. These are the buildings of Senate and also the Holy Synod. They are, so this is the famous archway, and um, this archway kind of opens the street for us. This street is parallel to the English Embankment, and as the tour goes, you will see it. Could you please turn down the volume? Grisha, please turn down the volume. I'm sorry. And yes, as the tour goes, you will see that the buildings on the English Embankment are placed one next to another, and you wouldn't see a lot of doors there as well. So the entrances to these buildings would normally be, as a rule, from this street, not from the embankment, but from the Galernaya street. That's the name of the street, Galernaya. It's a kind of small trade and transportation boats. They were called galera. Well, doesn't matter. Well, uh, since we're close to the water, there are a lot of facilities that were built in the 18th and 19th century that dealt with some navigation and the river and transportation. So this is just one of those things. And well, we are going to talk about this street too for sure. And the this archway is one of the symbols of the city, definitely, and one of the symbols. However, these buildings were not there at times of Catherine the Great. These buildings would be built a little later, so we are talking already the early 19th century. And this is the Galerna Street. So those are in fact the back side, the inner side of the buildings that we're going to look at from the embankment, and they look very different. It's really now mind-boggling to see how different the facades of one of the same building can be. Uh, yeah, so this is where the actual life is, because the embankment itself is I would say it's just a beautiful facade, but the life is from the Galerna Street and obviously inside. This square is you can see this is a big field. This is the photo taken before the revolution. So normally around the St. Isaac Square there would always be some festivities held, some big events. And by the way, at the back, in the background, you see the long building with colonnade. So this is the Admiralty building. This is the former shipbuilding yard. And also over there on the horizon to the left, just in the left edge of the image, you can see a building with a spire. This is the Peter and Paul Cathedral. This is the spire of it. Well, I think now it's easier to recognize. But it wasn't just the good events that took place here. We will talk about also about some not so pleasant things that also happened in that square. The architect of of the buildings of Senate and the Holy Synod was Carlo Rossi, an Italian architect who, in fact, I would say shaped the looks of the city. He is the one who finally kind of unified the architecture. He kind of developed the rules, so to speak, of how buildings in St. Petersburg should look, of what they should look like. And he is the one to introduce the system of like, ensembles, architectural ensembles, because before that, St. Petersburg, believe it or not, it was actually um, well deemed as an ugly city. Moscow before Carlo Rossi times, before mid 19th century, well, okay, first half of the 19th century, um, Moscow was considered the most beautiful city in the country, and St. Petersburg was kind of too eclectic, too different, too sporadic, and it was like a mixed bag of different styles. But after Carlo Rossi and this unification, well, things started to change, and St. Petersburg, I would say, got really revamped. Carlo Rossi also dealt really nicely with this very problematic plot of land. You can see that this building is, well, it could have been just a corner, but he made it into a nice looking angled building. And that's where he placed a church. As you can see, in every well, state facility, there had to be a church. So it shows you what an important place church occupied back then in, I would say, even political life of the country. Anyway, this is the photo taken from the internet. I don't have a drone, but the building in the courtyard is new one. What is Senate? Well, this is the legislative body, and the building to the left from the archway, the Holy Synod. It was actually the two institutions were developed at times of Peter the Great, and as you know, Peter, having moved the capital from Moscow to St. Petersburg by, let's say, 1714, he brought all the ministries from Moscow to St. Petersburg, and I would say extensively rework the political system and the distribution of powers between different political bodies. Right now, there's no such, well, there's no synod in this Senate in this building, and this is well, it's a constitutional court building, and several courts are located there, and the former synod building is the library now. Well, but we still call it a senate and a synod anyway, because that's just how it goes. You can see the a lot of architectural elements from the times when it was still the legislative body. And I don't really think they have gone too far, because constitutional court, well, it all sounds a little bit ridiculous to me now, knowing what have been happening in my country with the constitution, with democracy and everything. Nevertheless, well, the buildings are still there and they look lovely. And well, now we are crossing the street from the St. Isaac's Square, a monument to Peter the Great, to the English Embankment. So with this Senate building, it actually begins. I like to show old photographs to you. So there are some photos I have found. I have never been to the Constitutional Court building, unfortunately. Um, I don't know if the tours are allowed. I don't think so. However, some political institutions they do have guided tours, which have to be arranged in advance, and it's quite tricky. Well, but yeah, it's kind of doable. But with regards to the Senate, I don't think so. So I have found some photos. It's you're lovely to see. Well, you must have noticed the portraits of the monarchs and Nicholas II, and just lovely to see some of the interior. So these are the some politicians and the clerks that served in the Senate. Some offices, again, portrait of Nicholas II, as far as I can see, young Nicholas II, and also his father, Emperor Alexander III, to the right. There is a small table to the right, so that's that. Also, this is just some of the offices, of the Senate, and my absolute favorite photograph is this one. You see these people sitting in a lot of small boxes or like bags on the floor. Actually, these are the small bags for donations. And this was the some fundraiser for some charity event, and they are now telling everything and calculating of the proceeds from the charity event. So this photo was taken 1904 or around that time. Yeah. So, and let's enjoy the walk. Imagine the breeze coming your way. Oh, I'm so homesick. Nevertheless, so that's what I was talking about, right? Before we talk about Elizabeth, late Queen Elizabeth, see, have a look. There is just a chain of buildings. They're kind of going into the all the way into the depth of the embankment, and you wouldn't see a centimeter between them. That's this famous red line of St. Petersburg, as we like to call it. Well, as I mentioned, this embankment has changed its name multiple times. Let's say in the Soviet times, it was called the Embankment of the Red Fleet. Red because of the communists, because of the Red Army, and we will talk about it a little bit more. But the current name, the English embankment, is actually the first is the first name, because at times of Peter the Great, as you know, there were a lot of foreign specialists invited to the city, because there were just no specialists in Russia in many fields. So Peter had to hire everyone, and when these specialists came, they came with their families, they came for a long time. Many of them would settle in this area, especially English ambassadors, English merchants. And also, this is where English delegations would be staying. So that's the place. Now, but this is the old name. So in 1994, and that's why we see a photo of late Elizabeth II. In 1994, Elizabeth II visited St. Petersburg. That was the historic visit, and the only one, unfortunately. And exactly for her visit, the embankment was officially renamed, and the area was given its original name. Let's see some photographs. The Queen enjoyed her visit. Well, she visited everything, the Hermitage, all the palaces. Um, there was music, orchestra, good food, a lot of tours, obviously with the president involved was Boris Yeltsin at that time, and and a lot more. So she enjoyed the visit, and she liked the idea of the embankment named after England, because that's exactly how it was. Yes, she also visited the university, the St. Petersburg University. She visited Moscow for sure, and she met the veterans of the Second World War as well in Moscow. And yeah, she parted with Boris Yeltsin. So this is the one side of the. From here, you can see that the building kind of ends abruptly, and the new building begins. In fact, they used to be two different buildings. I mean, they kind of still are, but now the buildings are actually connected to one another. Uh, but originally, they were different buildings, completely separate buildings, and you can see they are designed differently. Yeah, it's classicism. You kind of see a lot of common features, but like new columns, but the columns are different, and they are not Corinthian, unlike in the Senate building, but they are Ionic, right? The simple ones. Well, the pink building, it looks it looks a very girly building, right? And in fact, it did belong to a woman. We call it the House of Catherine Laval. And yes, the building is pink, and yes, it belonged to a woman. But this is probably one of the most courageous, brave, and bold women in Russian history. Well, I mean, 19th century history. I'm not talking about the 20th century. I'm not talking about the revolution or the Second World War times. This is something different. And we are talking here the first quarter of the 19th century. So Catherine Laval was the wife of Sergei Trubetskoy, and Trubetskoy family dynasty is one of the oldest in the country. Grisha, turn down the volume, please. And they were always very close to the Romanovs in general. But then all of a sudden, the Trubetskoy family and mainly Sergei Petrovich Trubetskoy were involved in the plot, in actually the very first plot to, um, well, to take over the power from the Romanovs. And this event is known as the Decembrist uprisal, which I will talk about in a minute. And well, Trubetskoy, as I said, they were always very close to the Romanovs. They were one of the most influential and rich families in the country. So one can imagine how beautiful their house must have been. So we have some illustrations. So and just it's just it was something. Now it's easy for us to understand, but that back then many people just couldn't really wrap their minds around the situation. So we are talking about 1825, the Decembrist revolt. It took place in mid-December 1825, and the revolt took place in the square. So the St. Isaac Square, but there hadn't been any St. Isaac Cathedral at that time because the cathedral was built only in the 1850s. It finished in 1858. So it was, as you can see in this image, there is no St. Isaac Cathedral, and on this place there are some random houses. But yeah, it was still the same square. It looked a bit differently, but you can still see bits of the yellow building, right, of the Admiralty. You can see that. So this was the first official attempt to take over the power. And that was the first political crisis. So Alexander the First ended his reign, and he wanted his brother Constantine to uh, to rule next, and he was the next in kin. He was exactly the next one to rule, but Constantine had abdicated, and this is how Nicholas the First came to power. And Nicholas the First came to power, and he started his reign with the revenge and the chain of executions, and also the chain of a lot of aristocrats losing everything and taken into exile to Siberia. And Trubetskoy was one of those who could have been executed, but because Trubetskoy never came to the revolt that he actually had orchestrated, and he was one of the masterminds behind the whole thing, but he had not showed up. He changed his mind. So, and because he had not showed up, instead of execution, he was sent to exile. And his wife, a woman from, well, like creme of la creme, she was, she was as girly as a girl could be, from the pink house. So no, she never gave it a second thought. She followed her husband. She had left all the comfort, the money, and just the coziness of her home. She left everything behind to follow her husband. And she was that very first woman that was called further on by Russian poets and writers a Decembrist wife. And she was, she was an example for many other women that did the same. And and I mean it. It was like going to the middle of nowhere and living in the wooden hut with no, okay, with just some stoves and then tending the cattle, living in the village. among the villagers. Well, that was not really, I would say, it didn't really look too tempting, but these women, they were loyal to their husbands. This is how her house looked. Later on, by the way, they were pardoned and would return. Well, not everyone survived the exile, but on a larger scale, I would say things got back to normal, but much later. This is how this house looked after the Second World War. As you can see, it had been affected. Well, it's no wonder because the Nazis dropped more than, well, almost 150,000 bombs on the city over those almost 3 years of the siege. So I would say that the house was kind of okay. It was not maybe too lucky, but it could have been way worse. Well, obviously the interiors were restored, and something was lost for good. Luckily, there were photographs, there were illustrations, because it used to be one of the most opulent household, one of the most opulent homes in St. Petersburg. And Trubetskoy family, they were known for really good parties. And as I said, now the two buildings, they kind of belong to one another. Constitutional Court just kind of felt they didn't have enough space. I don't know. They probably needed like a room for an amendment, another room, another amendment, another room. I don't know. But nevertheless, so they just decided to merge the two buildings. And now, well, this is one of the buildings within the Constitutional Court complex. We have some photos, however. The photos were taken, when they were in open access. So I have never been inside. And this looks quite impressive. I would say looks very sleek. Okay. And I like well, this looks very girly to me. So I can imagine Laval enjoying herself, her morning boudoir maybe in this room. I don't know. Yeah, I can picture her enjoying herself by the mirror, sipping tea from imperial porcelain cups. Yeah, I could picture that for sure. Needless to say that these buildings, they have all been restored. They have, I would say, there are many millions spent on the restoration and upkeeping. And these are super cute lions you can find by the facade. Lions are one of the symbols of St. Petersburg, and these are one of the cutest lions. One of the cutest, and well, tourists and guides, we, including, we like to take we would take silly selfies with them. So, but even though it's a political kind of legislative institution now, well, not legislative, it's a judicial institution now, but well, the restoration, the way the restoration was carried out, well, they claim it's a good one. I mean, the historians, the architects, they claim that well, that the ministry had carried out a good, high quality historic restoration. Well, I hope so. Some more old postcards. You can see the building. You can see the Senate building. You can see the Laval building. It looks like it had been way darker, but the documents claim that the original color from the 1700s, from the 18th century, was light pink. So, and it was quite common for the buildings to change color, to be repainted multiple times, and also rebuilt multiple times, because they were all homes. As I said, they were all homes. Okay, so normally, as I said, the entrances would be from the other street, from the street behind these buildings, but from the embankment, there would be gala entrances. So the main entrance that would normally be used on special occasions, all the special guests. But the everyday life and the ordinary entrances would definitely be from the other street, from the Galerna Street. The house we're looking at, it belonged to a merchant family. Well, I'm omitting a lot of details because, in fact, each of these homes was originally built in the 1700s, in the 18th century, and they would change hands multiple times. I'm talking about, let's say, every house has its, has their names, and sometimes they're named after the most recent owner. I mean, before the revolution. Sometimes they're named after their first owner. But I mentioned the highlights because, well, each house can tell you so many stories, and we just don't have the time. And I want to bring to life some of the most, I would say, memorable things, the highlights. So that's why I'm not focusing on every building too much. I don't want to get too nerdy. I just want to share the stories. So the most, I would say, the latest owner before the revolution was Prince Vyacheslav Tenishev, who, apart from just being an aristocrat, he was also a merchant, a very successful merchant, by the way. He was the pioneer of automobile industry in the Russian Empire. Hmm? He was the pioneer. He is the one who brought the first cars, and he introduced Russian nobility with the cars, well as industry. I mean, and of course, he personally would supply cars to the Romanovs and aristocrats. And his wife, we actually have heard of his wife um, on multiple tours. Maria Tanisheva. Well, her husband did all the job, made money, and Maria Tanisheva didn't have to work. So she didn't really work. What she did, she tirelessly supported people in need, especially artists. So she became sort of a guardian angel for a lot of young artists, and among those would be even Sergei Diaghilev. About half a year ago, I did a series of talks on Sergei Diaghilev and his Russian ballet seasons and the artists, directors, dancers he worked with. Well, I enjoyed doing those tours very much for you. I hope you enjoy them too. The recordings of all those tours are available for my sponsors. As you know, my sponsors now have about 900 videos at their disposal on their secret playlist. 900 hours of tours. Not only St. Petersburg, also Israel, also Georgia, and some other places, Netherlands, and even Belgium a little bit, and other cities in Russia, such as Moscow or other locations. So many things, many videos. So and there are about 6 or 7 episodes of Diaghilev Tour. So so Maria Tensheva, sorry, she was. I was going to say Nadezhda, she was hope. Well, Nadezhda means hope. It's also a name in Russian, Nadia, Nadezhda, but actually it means hope. And she gave him hope because Diaghilev, he was not from a noble family. He came to Russia from Perm, a town in Urals, in the Ural region, and with his talent and his grip, he just managed to win the support of Tenisheva. And it wasn't just him. There were many artists who came to St. Petersburg penniless, but she saw the talent in them. And she helped a lot of great artists of early 20th century. Well, World of Art is this community of artists that launched this craziness, Art Nouveau craziness in St. Petersburg. So Tenisheva was one of the biggest patrons of this World of Art movement, from where the ballet seasons were born, and multiple artists associated with this massive project. So Tenisheva, apart from launching the art school in their house, We'll talk about it in a minute. She also had a manor in the countryside, not far from Moscow. And there she established also an art school. The building is still around. It looks like an old Russian house, izba or teremok. Dorley, I know in Hebrew, terem means not a log cabin, but in Russian we call it a log cabin terem. I know. No. It is confusing. That's not the term we're talking about. In Hebrew, terem is kind of a medical facility that is open 24/7 when most hospitals are closed. And this is where you would go when you have some, minor emergencies that don't require the ambulance. So where you can go on your own if you have a stomach ache or something in the middle of the night. That's type of thing. Okay, sorry for that lyrical digression. So, but this looks like a Russian wooden hut, like a log cabin. And this is where the art school was. And it was quite common. Okay, it's not like every wife of a Russian merchant did that, but you may have heard of like everyone in Russia involved and interested in art know of a school of Abramtseva that belonged to Sava Mamontov, who was one of the richest people in the country and also a big supporter of artists and the patron of a lot of artists in Russia. So Abramtseva became, the hub of neo-Russian art, Art Nouveau, Russian Art Nouveau as well. And Talashkina was kind of the same, I would say, but it was just run not by Mamontov, but Tenisheva. And there's an interesting story here that begins. So Nadezhda Tyanisheva was in touch with Sava Mamontov, and she was a frequent visitor to Abramtseva. And once she well, she was while she when she visited Abramtseva, she saw a Japanese doll in the collection of Sava Mamontov, and it was like a doll within a doll, like a doll within a doll, and a smaller doll in this doll. It was kind of a Japanese toy, and she told about this to the artist who who was who worked in Talashkina, Sergei Malutin. And Sergei Malutin had a big workshop. He was kind of he ran the entire workshop. He was also a sculptor, and he designed together with Vasily Zvezdочkin, who normally worked with wood. He carved from wood a lot of amazing things, by the way. And together they designed and crafted the matryoshkas. So, and those are the actual matryoshkas that you know as Russian dolls. So the way you know them, they were born thanks to Tianisheva and the artist that worked for her. So, in fact, we can say that in a way, these matryoshkas were designed on the English Embankment. And needless to say that these matryoshkas they took part in the World Fair in Paris in 1900, and they won Grand Prix. And you can see still these original matryoshkas in the Museum of St. Petersburg. Isn't it cool? Who would have thought, right? So that's well, actually, Matryoshkas were not born in St. Petersburg. They were born here, but in a way, they were born in St. Petersburg because Tyanisheva lived in St. Petersburg. Anyway, and that's, by the way, the church that was also built in Talashkina. Looks absolutely crazy. So this is Russian Art Nouveau at its best. So that's the World Fair. That's the Matryoshka dolls, but were exhibited and they won hearts of everyone. So and they still kind of are winning the hearts. Okay, so that's the house, and it's hard to imagine, but from the other side, from the Galerna Street, Maria Tenesheva, in her own house, opened the art classes, and it wasn't even her idea. First, she was just the one who would make donations, generous donations, uh, to different artists, and those artists would be, would be providing financial aid to their students. That was a common practice. And once Ilya Repin, one of the greatest artists of the 20th century Russia, one of the most expensive ones, he kind of had an idea. He came up with an idea for Tenesheva to open art school herself, where Ripin and also his colleagues would be running private classes and private workshops. And it worked. And it was amazing. And this is where a lot of Jewish artists were finally given opportunity to study from the best, study from the art professors and art historians. The thing is that there was up until the last quarter of the 19th century, because of the pales of settlement, because of the restrictions imposed on Jews, it was extremely difficult for the Jewish people to study in universities, because there was, a limitation, a sort of a quota. Well, however, if a Jew converted to any Christian faith, well, that would not be a problem, and all those restrictions would be lifted off immediately. But Tenesheva couldn't care less about that. So a lot of Jewish artists, up until the end of the 19th century, they would start their career with Tenesheva classes. So thanks to Tenesheva, her husband's money, and Ilya Repin. And in this street, from this street, they would be entering the house, and these are the students of one of the first sessions. Well, the photo was taken at the entrance to, well, there was a kind of a side of the building, like a wing of the building. That's where Chernysheva spared several rooms for the classes. Isn't it an amazing story? So Chernysheva was an amazing woman. Yeah, so without her, I would say Russian art would have looked very different and would be looking very different now. I'm pretty sure, had it not been for her, and her generous donations and faith into the talents of some of those people. Yeah, so that's that. And another building is going to be the last one I think we're going to talk about. Well, originally it was of 2 floors. In the 1700s, in the 18th century, it had 2 floors. And then in the 19th century, they added another floor. As you know, there was no really limitation in the number of floors a building could have, but the condition was that no building could be higher than the Hermitage, well, the Winter Palace, and well, there were all restrictions applied to religious facilities, I mean, to churches, which could not be higher than the Peter and Paul Cathedral. But well, number of floors was not an issue. It was the height. So the third floor was added a little later. And this house belonged to the family of Paskevich, to the son of Ivan Paskevich. And Ivan Paskevich was actually he became a viceroy of the Romanovs in the Caucasus. Yeah, and the house this house belonged to his son Fyodor, who also happened to be a good military leader, a commander, and I would say he inherited the best qualities from his father. So Paskevich, he became the viceroy in the Caucasus. And if you remember from my tours, In the 19th century, after annexation by the Russian Empire, Tbilisi became the financial and the political center of the Caucasus, which means that Paskevich, together with his wife, stayed in Tiflis. Oh, Tbilisi. This is another connection, and we are not even done with that. So we will be coming back on these tours. We will be coming back uh, to Tbilisi for sure in many ways. We have a lot of photos. By the way, in some of those buildings, you see the entrances from the embankment. So those will be in some buildings, the entrances would be added later in the end of the 19th century. Yeah. So Paskevich, because he was an army man, a military man, he had a collection. Fyodor Paskevich, I'm talking about. Well, but it doesn't matter. So he had a collection of swords and knives and everything, and you can see how they were exhibited in the walls. And this house was opulent. This house was so rich. And the photos, I think, well, they don't really need any explanations. Look at all this furniture. Look at all the collection of the Japanese, Chinese vases, sorry, the porcelain. Look, I mean, just look at the furniture. Look at the interior. So I guess they speak for itself. So this house was indeed one of the richest in the embankment. Uh, and for people who visited the palace, were impressed. Many would claim that those were some breathtaking interiors. Um, well, I would say, I would put it like that. The interiors that we have nowadays are probably even more opulent than the ones they had in the 19th century. Just see that. In the Soviet times, the building was given to one of the, scientific facilities, research facilities, and the building still belongs to this institution, uh, but they have preserved a lot of interiors. Well, the ones that survived the Soviet times, they have preserved. There was a knight's hall, and these knights are so scary. I don't know. It looks like they're actual people, stuck in the wall, to me at least. So this was one of the halls where they exhibited, the swords and knives and everything. So this collection. This is the dining room. This is the prayer home, the praying home, the prayer room. And this is where we are stopping now. And we're going to start from here next Saturday. The tour is already up. You can see it on my website. You can see it on the calendars, whichever of the two calendars you're using. So the next house is also connected with Tiflis. It's related to Tbilisi, and one of the tours I will be doing, well, probably early December, depending on the weather. Because now I want to do more live walks in Tbilisi while it's still warm and dry. But when the rainy season begins, I will be able to take you on pre-recorded tours. So many palaces in Tbilisi. Like, I mean it, palaces, okay? But it's kind of a little bit of a teaser, not a spoiler, but the teaser. Okay, now let me turn the chat back on. And also for those who joined us a little bit later, I would like to remind you that in 30 minutes from now, I will be, Misha and I will be doing a talk on Russian literature. We'll be talking about the literature that, well, the Russian, Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, and Chekhov's read themselves before becoming the biggest writers in world literature, right? So we'll talk about Ivan Krylov, kind of the predecessor. And then in 1 hour after that tour is over, I'm taking you to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Big deal, big time. I'm also sharing a bunch of links for the upcoming weekend, and there are going to be a couple more tours scheduled for Sunday, November 16th. Among them will be another live walk in Tbilisi with a very special guest. But that's all I'm going to say now. This tour is going to be scheduled shortly. I just need to make sure the timing is okay for both of us. And then, well, I hope you're subscribed to my newsletter. And if you're not on my website, Anna Your Guide, you can easily do that. And what beautiful buildings and homes and British. Thank you. It was, yes, exactly. So thanks to the Queen, this street kind of uh, uh, has its original name back. It probably would have been returned at some point because the Red Fleet Embankment, this name could not stay. I mean, now it probably could have, but well, given the political context, but no, definitely this name wouldn't have been, no, it wouldn't have survived the 90s when they hated the Soviet regime so much. So, no, definitely not. But I guess this was the best timing and the best idea. Thank you so much, Sharon. Thank you everyone for joining me. I would appreciate your support. You know, all my tours are free to join unless they are commissioned by you, unless they are some incentives or B2B events, which I'm also open to. Well, I would appreciate your support. However, you can send me a tip by PayPal or you could buy me a coffee, and that would be great. Thank you so much for everything. Oh, Cindy, hi dear. Well, I'm glad you're here. You know, I always get a little worried once you're not on a tour. I'm glad you're here. This has been recorded just like the previous tour. And Cindy, by the way, and also everyone else. Yesterday, I had a lot of technical issues, like connectivity issues on my St. Petersburg tour, another premiere of a different island. So it took me about 2 hours today, but I managed to work on it. So the recording in a good quality is already available on my YouTube channel. So this is my way to say I'm sorry for the issues, and this is how I make it up to yesterday's inconveniences. Thank you everyone for joining me. In 30 minutes from now, Misha and I are going to launch the new series of talks on Russian literature. Thank you, and I will see you very soon. And then Jerusalem, Temple Mount. Bye bye.